Well, good morning again. Here we are back on the stump. Now, that term on the stump, when you're in the logging world, it means that you're actually working. You're on the stump sawing timber. But for me, it's a stage now. Those days of being on the stump, falling timber are over. So I told you this was going to be an educational video, and I hope you find it not only educational but entertaining. Things have changed a lot since my day when I first started cutting timber. All we had back then was a little tin hard hat that was half of this size with a bill on it. We didn't have any safety orange. We didn't wear safety glasses. We didn't wear ear protection. All those things have evolved since timber falling really became an industry. Now everything has to be safety oriented. They've evolved. You typically wear chaps, leg protection, and I can't hear now. I have to wear hearing aids because I ran chainsaws back in those days that were. No, I modified my chainsaws. I ran McCulloch chainsaws, and I did that because they were the only ones that you could buy a go-kart kit for, and you could hot rod those chainsaws. And so we would take the mufflers off or modify the mufflers and make it so they had no back pressure, but they screamed, they were loud, but you could get more timber cut, and that was the name of the game. That's what we were looking for. But so safety is a big issue now, and very well it should be. I don't know if it has to be to the extent that they've got it now. I sometimes watch those guys on TV, and man, I mean, tell you, they're dooted up. We got reflectors everywhere, and yeah, I think they've gone a little overboard, but what do I know? I'm not in the industry anymore. Well, we're going to get back to the story of the big tree. And if you'll remember, I told you that we cut a 4x4 block. And not only for him, but we cut one of our own. However, ours was not as long as his was. Ours was shorter. It was probably 30 inches. So in working down there so much, we moved a camp trailer down and set it up. And we got a picnic table. We acquired one from a park that was just down the road a ways, and it just kind of showed up at our camp. And so we set that block on the picnic table. And when we went home on a Friday, we picked up a package of push pins, a box of push pins, all different colored tips. And we got some sewing needles. And so after we got off work in the afternoon, we would sit around that picnic table. We put it right beside a little creek that ran under the road, and where it came out the other side, it fell about 10 feet, and so we used that for a shower. So we would sit around that picnic table, and we would play a game of cribbage, and then Dave, my brother, would work from one end, and I would work from the other, and we would count those, and every 10 years, we would put a sewing needle in, and then every 100 years, we would put a push pin in to mark 100 years of progress. Sometimes those push pins were so close that the plastic on the tops almost touched for 100 years because the growth rings were so close together. And then sometimes the growth rings would be they would gradually get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then they would start declining and get smaller and smaller and smaller. But one thing we found in doing that was, now mind you, we were working on the west coast, the furthest most west coast that you can get. And it was a rainforest, if you will. Most of the days it was a toss-up whether we wore rain clothes to keep dry or not, because you couldn't. If you put on rain clothes, then you sweated so bad working in them that you were wet from the inside out rather than from the outside in. But we finally found some rain clothes that were light, and we wore those. But it rained a lot. And I'm telling you, in the summertime, it'd be clear like this, like it is right now. But you'd get up in those mountains as the day progressed, the fog would lift, the sun would shine on the side of that hill, and the fog would actually turn into a storm system in itself. And it would just pour down rain on us. Just rain like crazy. And then if you left there and drove out of there and just got a small ways away, no more rain. Cleared up. So it was wet. The point I'm trying to get to, this place was wet. So one thing we noticed, not too far into this, every 350 years, almost on the mark, 350 years, that tree had been burnt. That's significant, because for a tree like that to burn in this forest, the environment had to totally change. It had to go from being rain and humid to dry and arid. So what would happen in those 350 years, the duff, the stuff that's on the ground, can you pan this? And this stuff accumulates. And if you get 350 years of it, it builds up. And so you've got fuel on the forest floor. Well, what ignites that? How does that burn? Well, it has to be hot and dry, which means that the environment totally changes. Imagine that. So maybe there's just no such thing as global warming. Maybe it's part of the cycle, and that it's an evolution. We are now living in here in this particular place. We're living in a hot, dry environment. But I've only been around for 73 years. The first few of that I don't remember. But I can tell you this, our weather has changed dramatically in 70 years. Where I grew up, there was a lot of years, consecutive years, that we didn't go to school because we were snowed in. The snow would get from 6 to 12 feet in the wintertime. They couldn't keep we lived on logging roads, and they couldn't keep them clear. I remember my dad would run the snowblower in the wintertime trying to keep the main road open, but it was days and days and days before you could drive. The roads were closed, couldn't go anywhere. And now that doesn't happen anymore. In the 70 years since I was a little kid, it's just changed. You don't get weather like that anymore. So my point is that nobody's been here for 350 years, folks. Nobody's been in the United States except the natives for 350 years. And if they could talk, they probably wouldn't, because you don't need to know. And that's the way I kind of think about some of the things too. It's like some of the things that I know you don't need to know. But every 350 years. So that block is 30 inches long. We're counting it every day. Dave counting from one end, I'm counting from the other. Every 350 years is a burn mark. We counted 1,800 years. Think about it. We counted 1,800 years, and we only counted about half of the growth rings that tree had. So we killed a tree that was 3,000. Basically, I'm going to guess, and this is not a very educated guess, it's only going off of what I know, that tree was probably 3,500 to 4,000 years old. and the Forest Service had us kill it so we could find out how old it was. That tree, as far as I know, and I'm sure that this is true, is still laying in the bottom of that canyon. We killed that tree for absolutely no reason. So some years later, and I don't know how or why, but I was working for the government, and I ended up at a USDA Forest Service office in Eugene, Oregon. I believe that's where it was. And as we drove in, there were these two great big concrete saddles that were about 12 foot wide, and they had a tree that was about 6 foot in diameter laying in it. It was one of the most ridiculous looking things you've ever seen. Total waste of money. So when I went in, I inquired at the front desk, and the lady said, "You won't believe how many people asked about that thing." She said there used to be this guy that was going to have a tree flown in with a helicopter and set in that cradle out there. I think I knew who he was. I think we killed a tree for him. And I'm pretty sure that that little weasel had us kill that tree so he could stand in front of it and show himself off. And there was going to be a big story written up about it, how he conquered the world by killing this tree. I don't know how much money was spent on that project. In those days, 50 years ago, it was thousands and thousands of dollars. I guess in these days it would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars and possibly even into the millions. So the educational part of this is twofold. That tree was thousands of years old and it died for absolutely no reason. And somebody out there in this world needs to be accountable for their actions. I'm a Republican, I guess you probably guessed that. And I'm a little bit more conservative thinking than most Democrats. Why would you waste all that money so that one little sawed-off half pint that worked for the Federal Forest Service could make himself, in his opinion, look good? But does it happen all the time? Still, to this day? I'm afraid it does. So I'm going to appeal to common sense people right now. There is so much timber on federal ground, not a federal and state too, but let's deal with the federal government right now, that is going to waste. California, not only California, but they're the worst. They're burning their forests up intentionally doing it so that private-owned timber industries can have their timber be worth more money because there is no federal forest anymore to harvest. So people like with industries and up here in our neck of the woods, their timber is worth a lot of money because there is no federal Forest Service forestry plan anymore. They've done away with all the small sales. The reason they've done that is so that small mills can't get timber. That way they have to go out of business, which once again makes these big companies, their timber worth a lot more money because they don't have any competition. They can get whatever they want to out of it. So that's pretty much the extent of my educational video. I hope you learned something here. The waste has got to stop. I mean, it has to stop. The Federal Forest Service just wastes so much money. This firefighting thing they've got going on is just a scam. They don't put out fires. They don't prevent fires. It's a scam. Mr. President, the head of the USDA Forest Service and the Department of Agriculture needs to set up a program where small business owners like myself and my brother, those of us brothers, both of them, we all have sawmills. And the oldest brother, he's been getting some timber, thankfully, but my brother Ed and I, we can't get any timber. We'd like to have that changed. We'd like to have small sales brought back into the Forest Service. And so that's the end of my stage performance. I thank you so much for watching. If there's any questions, please share. What's that called? How do they get a hold of us? Yeah, so you have to like, subscribe, share, hit the gong button, Now this will be the last one in this series about the big tree. And I really, honestly, I'd like to have somebody go back in there. I can't do it anymore. I just don't have wheels enough to get back in that, down the bottom of that canyon. But I'd like to have somebody go back down there and look and see if that tree is still laying in the bottom of that river. I cannot imagine that the water, of course there was a pretty good flow of water sometimes in that canyon, but I can't imagine that they washed that log out of there. So I'd like to know if it's there. So don't ask me for a location. I can tell you the story, and I asked my brother, I got to see him here a month ago. I asked him if he could still find his way back in there, and he said, yeah, I think so. So it's possible to find out where that place is. If any of you are younger, healthier people than I am, or be interested in going there and looking at that, I'd like to get your view on this. So anyway, contact us, let us know. I can't get better unless you tell me what to do. Thank you again. See you guys.